This is Quality Over Quantity. I'm host Samuel Monte Young-Bey, and in this episode we get into Unum Sanctum. In November of 1302, Benedetto Caetani, better known as Pope Boniface VIII, set forth an announcement of and/or for papal supremacy and the subordination and subjection of that which is carnal or seen unto the powers of the spiritual or that which is unseen, thus granting and commanding the conversion of non-Christian souls for salvation and or subjugation, all compiled within his bull, Unum Sanctum. So let's get into it. Unum Sanctum, Pope Boniface VIII. The bull, an official document issued by the Pope and sealed with a bulla, Unum Sanctum, in which Pope Boniface VIII asserted his rights against King Philip the Fair of France, is a landmark in the history of the doctrine of papal primacy. The following English translation of Unum Sanctum is taken from a doctrinal dissertation written in the Department of Philosophy at the Catholic University of America and published by CUA, Catholic University of America Press, in 1927. Urged by faith, we are obliged to believe and to maintain that the Church is one, holy, Catholic, including or concerning all mankind, universal, and also apostolic, of or relating to a succession of spiritual authority for the 12 apostles, regarded by Anglicans, Roman Catholics, Eastern Orthodox, and some others to have been perpetuated by successive ordinations of bishops and to be requisite for valid orders and administration of sacraments. We believe in her firmly, and we confess with simplicity that outside of her there is neither salvation, preservation or deliverance from destruction, difficulty, or evil. See salvage, the rescue of a ship or its cargo from fire or shipwreck, the act of saving imperial property from loss, nor the remission, release as from a debt, penalty, or obligation. See remit, to transmit money for and or in payment of sins, as the spouse in the canticles, the song of songs and or Solomon. Psalm 6:8 proclaims, "One is my dove, my perfect one. She is the only one, the chosen of her who bore her, and she represents one sole mystical body, whose head is Christ, and the head of Christ is God." 1 Corinthians 11:3. In her then is one Lord, a man of rank in a feudal society, or in one that retains feudal forms and institutions, especially A, king, B, territorial magnate, C, proprietor of a manor. One faith, belief in God or in a set of religious doctrines. One baptism, Ephesians 4:5. There had been at the time of the deluge only one ark of Noah, prefiguring the one church, which ark, having been finished to a single cubit, had only one pilot, one who guides or directs a course of action for others, and guide, to supervise the training or education of, i.e. Noah. And we read that outside of this ark, all that subsisted on the earth was destroyed. We venerate this church as one, the Lord having said by the mouth of the prophet, "Deliver, O God, my soul from the sword, and my only one from the hand of the dog." Psalms 21:20. He has prayed for his soul, that is, for himself, heart, and body. And this body, that is to say, the church, he has called one because of the unity of the spouse, of the faith, of the sacraments, and of the charity of the church. This is the tunic of the Lord, the seamless tunic, which was not rent, but which was cast to calculate astrology. By lot, one's fortune in life, one's fate. John 19:23-24. Therefore, of the one and only church, There is one body and one head, not two heads like a monster, that is, Christ and the vicar, an Anglican parish priest in a parish where historically someone other than the priest was entitled to the tithes. Christ, Peter and the successor of Peter, since the Lord speaking to Peter himself said, feed, food for animals, especially livestock. My sheep, a person regarded as timid, weak, or submissive. John 21:7, meaning my sheep in general, not these nor those in particular, whence we understand that he entrusted all to him, Peter. Therefore, if the Greeks and others should say that they are not confided to Peter and to his successors, they must confess not being the sheep of Christ. Since our Lord says in John, there is one sheepfold and one shepherd, we are informed by the text of the gospel that in this church and in its power are two swords, namely, the spiritual and the temporal. For when the apostle said, behold, here are two swords, Luke 22:38, that is to say, in the church. Since the apostles were speaking, the Lord did not reply that there were too many, but sufficient. Certainly the one who denies that the temporal sword is in the power of Peter has not listened well to the word of the Lord commanding, put up thy sword into thy scabbard, Matthew 26:52. Both therefore are in the power of the church, that is to say, the spiritual and the material sword, but the former is to be administered for the church, but the latter by the church. The former in the hands of priests, the latter by the hands of kings and soldiers, but at the will and sufferance of the priests. However, one sword ought to be subordinate to the other, and temporal authority subjected to spiritual power. For since the apostle said, there is no power except for God, and the things that are ordained of God. Romans 13:1 and 2. But they would not be ordained if one sword were not subordinate to the other, and if the inferior one, as it were not led upwards by the other. For according to the blessed Dionysius, it is a law of the divinity that the lowest thing reach the highest place by intermediary. Then according to the order of the universe, all things are not led back to order equally and immediately, but the lowest by the intermediary and the inferior by the superior. Hence we must recognize the more clearly that spiritual power surpasses in dignity and in nobility any temporal power whatever, as spiritual things surpass the temporal. This we see very clearly also by the payment, benediction, and consecration of the tithe, by the acceptance of power itself, and by the government even of things. For with truth as our witness, it belongs to the spiritual power to establish the terrestrial power, and to pass judgment if it has not been good. Thus is accomplished the prophecy of Jeremiah concerning the church and the ecclesiastical power. Behold, today I have placed you over nations and over kingdoms and the rest. Therefore, if the terrestrial power err, it will be judged by the spiritual power. But if a minor spiritual power err, it will be judged by a superior spiritual power. But if the highest power of all err, it can be judged only by God and not by men, according to the testimony of the apostle. The spiritual man judgeth of all things, and he himself is judged by no man. 1 Corinthians 2:13. This authority, however, though it has been given to man and is exercised by man, is not human, but rather divine, granted to Peter by a divine word, and reaffirmed to him, Peter, and his successors by the one whom Peter confessed. The Lord said to Peter himself, whatsoever you shall bind on earth shall be bound also in heaven, etc. Matthew 16:19. Therefore, whoever resists this power, thus ordained by God, resists the ordinance of God. Romans 13:2. Unless he invent like Manichaeans two beginnings, which is false and judged by us heretical, since according to the testimony of Moses, it is not in the beginnings, but in the beginning that God created heaven and earth. Genesis 1:1. Furthermore, We declare, we proclaim, we define that it is absolutely necessary for salvation that every human creature be subject to the Roman pontiff. Pontiff, high priest. So here's what happened. Benedetto, after changing his name upon taking the position, to Pope Boniface VIII, brought it upon himself in November of 1302, while beefing with King Philip the Fair, the King of France. He was beefing with Benedetto, you feel me, aka Boniface VIII. So Boniface wrote a letter and put his seal on it, saying that the whole world and all the people and all the creatures in it must be under me as Pope, as successor of Saint Peter, as Peter being the chosen successor of Christ, as Christ being the successor of God. So basically, Benedetto has established from here on in, you feel me, that everyone in existence, in creation, on this side of the sphere, must be brought into the fold, you feel me? You must be made part of the Christian circle, which is what church means. Church is a German word, Kirche, Chirche, sometimes spelled with a K, but V circle. So they want you in the Christian circle. So you have to receive, they need you to be saved. You gotta get salvation, you feel me, for the remission of your sin, you feel me. That's crazy. But everybody has to agree to these terms also, for all who deny these terms lose any connection with God, the man upstairs, you feel me. Benedetto has some real things going for him, you feel me. And I don't want to get into his history because I just skimmed it a little bit, but he was doing some, you feel me, he was involved in some things, but he had a long history of beefing with France, even though they say he was trying to squash the beef with France. It always ended up being tension between Benedetto and France, you feel me? And then when Benedetto became Pope Boniface VIII, France was heavily beefing with him, so much so that if I'm remembering it accurately, they killed Benedetto, you feel me? And there was always accusations, there was levying heavy accusations against Benedetto while he was Pope Boniface VIII, you feel me? So it was a big beef thing going on with them, between France and the Pope, the Roman Catholic Church, the high priest, the chosen successor, the vicar of Christ, you feel me? These names, the vicar of Christ. Somebody supposed to be receiving tithe for somebody else. Who you receiving tithe for? The vicar of Christ. Receiving tithe for Christ? Because they're supposed to be entitled to Christ, but you just housing them for him. Yeah, that's crazy. But this is Unum Sanctum, one of many papal bulls that was put out by many popes, many pontiffs, many high priests, Roman pontiffs, high priests, you feel me? So Magna Carta is one. And I think I am going to do a video on the Magna Carta, because it's a contract for all the subordinates of the Pope the Roman Pontiff, the High Priest of the Roman Catholic Church. You know that's a universal situation. You understand? All parties must be involved in this universal corporation situation. You feel me? So, this is quality over quantity. I'm host Samuel Monte Young-Bey. Deuces. If you enjoyed this video and would like to see more like it, subscribe to my channel. Let me get a like down here so YouTube will know what's going on. And hit that notification bell also. And I mean, leave a comment too. Alright?
Life completely fucked. New York Stock Exchange, instantly your numbers drop. Souls that remain, depression is great. They go berserk, expecting it to stay the same, knowing that it'll never work.